Hi, I'm Kyle Evangelista, president and group publisher for Profile Magazine. And today I'm excited to sit down with Chief People Officer at Guild Education and Profile's latest global issue guest editor, Lorna Hagen. The two of us recently discussed how HR and global leaders can lean into remote global reality. And I want to continue on that conversation today. So, Lorna, let's dive right in. So, you've had an interesting career trajectory, one that's taken you across a range of industries: entertainment, financial services, education, computer software, and more. So, what have been some of your major takeaways that have been industry agnostic as they relate to the human resources function?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I'm really honored to be doing this with you and so honored to have been a part of the magazine. I think a few things on this question. One is you need to remember the human piece of human resources and really look at an organization when you're going in from the lens of who are the people that have been here? What have they built? How do I honor that? And how do I get to know them? And I think that's absolutely universal. I think you learn that with experience and humility. And I think it's been one of the keys to how I've been able to really be industry agile and had a great time, learning new industries, learning new ways of working cultures, and it's I think that idea of being vulnerable, the ability to say I don't know, and then being kind of just having a humility about how you want to introduce yourself and then be of service to an organization.
Hmm. And I know that you mentioned a couple months ago when we initially chatted, and I'm sure not only you but also many others are still dealing with this, but how you're trying to figure out how to manage, and I think more importantly, not manage but motivate fully distributed teams. So, what type of progress have you made? What type of progress are you seeing? What's worked? What hasn't? And how are you continually adapting your plans as the world, as we all know, just continues to spiral?
Um, yeah, it's such a good question, especially now that Delta has hit and we're all dealing with this new wave of COVID. And so, a few things. One is that we at Guild have started to adapt our COVID response team into a future work team. So we carved out and are carving out a COVID response to be a freestanding thing. It's almost like an emergency response system, or your business continuity planning teams, and then taken a larger, more expansive approach to how we work, where we work, and the type of work that we're doing. And so, really thinking about and carving out what I'm calling a lab. So now using a lab construct to really think about, well, what should the workplace be? And so we're kicking off a project to really redefine space for today and for the future, right? So space stops being about open farm cubicles and open kitchens. And so, how do we really repurpose not only the architecture of it, but the idea of going to meet people someplace? So, we're kicking off that project, thinking about how different competencies need to be embedded immediately into your hire and retention and promotion practices. So what worked then won't work now. And so how do you think about that? And the first line of defense there is reskilling our managers to really be very effective in managing remote teams. No one's ever going back to the office 5 days a week. I just think that's misplaced if people are thinking that, because all the literature is saying employees aren't going to accept old ways of working. And so, how do we arm our frontline managers to really be the primary motivators of that workforce? So, a whole line of work around what does it mean to be a manager? How do I interact with my employees differently? How do I make sure that there's connectivity? So, that goes into the way of working.
Hmm.
And then really redefining for us what we're calling heads up and heads down work. So, heads up work is when you do want to collaborate and be with people, and heads down is when you're either doing readouts or independent work. And so, there's still information, and we're working through how it's going to work for us. But having two designations that again allow us to redefine the type of work that we do and where we do that work have become really critical. And so the ability to do some carve outs, have a lab space, an ideation space, a sandbox to test certain models has been one of the ways in which Guild is moving.
We're also moving into a new office, and I'm glad to hear you mention a few different ideas and strategies that we just so happen to be focused on and working on. So, breath of fresh air there. Sounds sounds like we're doing the right thing and following the trends.
Well,
Um,
you guys should be. You get a lot of experts talking to you guys. You have the great good fortune of a lot of knowledge.
yeah, lots of pressure, but it's always good to hear from people, different companies, different experiences, different sizes. I mean, that's why we exist, Profile, in the first place. So, and I also remember a couple months ago when initially talking to you, I had asked you for your advice for up and coming global executives, and one of the pieces of advice that you gave was to stop underestimating the importance of values and the importance of culture. Can you expand on that and tell us why is it important that we don't underestimate the importance of values and culture?
I think this comes from a little bit of what I said at the beginning of our conversation today, which is this idea of humility and the idea of, and I say this a lot, of vulnerability and being able to say, I don't know. And for a leader to be able to be humble, be vulnerable, and appreciate the context of an organization and not especially today where we are all feeling displaced in some way, shape, or form, right? We're working in places that we don't traditionally work in. We're working with colleagues, dogs, and children that we don't usually work with. And that continues, like that hasn't really ended. And anchoring as an employee, there's something very safe and comforting in anchoring in the culture that you knew or that you joined or that you helped to form. And so being very vigilant in how you maintain and enhance culture. And I think now what I would say to you is I would add this piece around every leader's job should be about enhancing the culture to fit for the new reality of today. Like, do those values actually serve you today, and will they serve you in the future? So I think those are, there's an added perspective and nuance to it that becomes really critical as we're thinking about what does working look like going forward.
Hmm. Well, Lorna, it was a pleasure as always, and thanks for sitting down with us today.
My pleasure, Kyle. Thank you.